Arthur West, veteran Scottish peace campaigner and former chairperson of the Scottish Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament. And thanks for joining us today.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to join you.
Thank you. You have been a campaigner against nuclear weapons for many years, including for some years as a chairperson of the Scottish Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament. Could you explain the scale of the nuclear weapons stationed in Scotland, first of all?
Yes, I think it comes as a surprise sometimes to our friends in other countries that the extent of Scotland's stockpile of nuclear weapons. I mean, there are actually around 225 nuclear weapons that are based in Scotland, 25 miles from our biggest city, Glasgow. And at any given time, 120 of these nuclear bombs are really available for deployment on Vanguard class nuclear powered submarines. So we have quite an extensive stockpile of nuclear bombs in Scotland, and it's really quite frightening. And I think that's the reason why the Scottish Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament is so strong and enjoys such support in Scotland.
Thank you. Secondly, nuclear weapons have been a key part of the strategy of NATO, as we see. The American-led North Atlantic Treaty Organization, since it was created during the Cold War period, what do you think the pressure of NATO and its nuclear arsenal is today?
Well, I mean, NATO is clearly a nuclear weapons-based alliance, and there are countries in NATO that don't have nuclear weapons, but even if they don't have nuclear weapons, they're expected to be part of a nuclear weapons planning group. So they get pulled into planning and discussions about how nuclear weapons, might be used. It seems unbelievable that they'd ever be used. Let's hope they're not. But NATO's presence in the world, I think, it makes it more likely, because it is a nuclear weapons-based alliance. And I think we've seen that they had a summit in 2021, and one of the main statements that came out of that summit was, as long as there are nuclear weapons in the world, NATO will remain a nuclear alliance. And the leading member of NATO is obviously the US. Well, the US has the most powerful stock of nuclear weapons in the world. And two other members, unfortunately, Britain and France have nuclear weapons. And what's maybe not commonly known is that 5 NATO countries actually store US nuclear weapons on their territories. Countries such as Germany, Italy, Turkey, Belgium, and the Netherlands. So they all store US nuclear weapons in their territory. And there have been attempts in the past. I mean, there's quite a lot of opposition to the storing of these nuclear weapons in the likes of Germany and Belgium. And, there's been a number of people in the parliaments in these countries have raised concerns, but they've never been successful in getting these nuclear weapons removed. So, it's a very worrying situation. And I think the clear message I would want to give is that NATO is very much a nuclear weapons-based alliance. And we need other structures in the world today to try and get a more peaceful world. I mean, I think we need to look at NATO and the way it operates. And I think we need to try and build up other organisations to try and play a more peaceful role in the world.
Thank you, dear Arthur. One of the members of NATO is Turkey, which in recent years has been found to have support. ISIS gangs invaded the Kurdish region of Syria, still threatening the Cyprus, and being involved in incursions into Kurdistan in northern Iraq. Recently, there have been even reports of Turkey using chemical weapons against Kurdish forces and civilians as well. What is your views of these actions?
Yes, I mean, as you say, I mean, just, as you listed there, I mean, Turkey's adopted a very aggressive foreign policy in recent years, which is quite worrying and really quite depressing. And these reports of Turkey using chemical weapons are really, really worrying. I mean, the use of chemical weapons is against international law, and there is a convention that that's an international law that countries should not be involved in the development or the stockpiling or the use of chemical weapons. And this was agreed in 1997. And Turkey signed up to that convention, yet there seems to be these reports of the use of chemical weapons. So I think there are a number of people calling for an investigation by, there's an organisation for the prohibition of chemical weapons. It's an organisation that's been set up to monitor that this convention against the use of chemical weapons actually is carried out. So, I mean, I think I would be joining with others, and indeed probably across the Scottish peace movement, people would be supporting an urgent investigation into Turkey's use of chemical weapons, because it's completely indefensible and completely reckless, and as I say, goes clearly against international law.
What should the international community be doing about the use of chemical weapons by Turkey and against the Turkey's war crimes, and as the Turkey's actions are all against the international law as well, as you underlined? So what
Yeah.
else needs to be done?
Well, I think there needs to be an investigation by the relevant authorities, and there needs to be an urgent investigation. But I do think that parliamentarians in other countries have got a job to do to ask some questions of their foreign ministers, and I think the information I have, I think I'd be asking some of the organisations in the peace movement in Scotland to be asking their members of parliament to start asking questions about these reports of Turkey using chemical weapons, because we if you have got international law, it's very, very important that it's implemented, and so there needs to be an investigation, there needs to be pressure put on Turkey, there needs to be answers given in relation to this, and we need to try and do everything we can if this is happening, to stop it happening.
Thank you. Lastly, um, what is your message to the Kurdish people who are being attacked by Turkey in this way?
Yeah, I think we would want to express solidarity with the Kurdish people. It's very difficult to imagine how horrible a chemical weapon attack would be. So we'd want to express solidarity, and I do think it's urgent that questions are asked by parliamentarians in different countries about it. So I think I would want to be, as I say, expressing support and solidarity. And I think what this also shows up, I mean, I think one of the lessons of Ukraine is that what we need to do is we need to look at the international organisations that are in the world and question whether they're working very well. And I think there's now a case for looking at the United Nations and making it more democratic, probably looking at how larger countries can stop action in the United Nations. And I also think that as an alternative to NATO, we need to look at, there's an organisation called the Organisation for Security and Cooperation in Europe, which I think, organisations like that need support rather than NATO. So I think in terms of the Kurdish people, yes, we express solidarity as human beings, express concern as human beings, but I think there's got to be some actions taken. I think, people like me have got a duty to ask their members of parliament to raise questions, and people like me and we've also got a duty to look at the international organisations and how they're working and perhaps how we can get international organisations working more effectively to prevent the use of chemical weapons and prevent them being used on defenceless people.
Dear Arthur West, veteran Scottish peace campaigner and former chairperson of the Scottish Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament, thanks for joining us. Thank you for your valuable comments today.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.